This is the state of things in November 1809 in the islands of Mauritius, the tropical islands where weather really hasn't been much of a factor and probably won't be if we keep using our rules for Heart of Oak. In the campaign game for Heart of Oak, you only have a 3% chance of the weather changing, which means it's going to change once a month. Look, it's the tropics, right? So maybe that's reasonable. A little bit of rain, a little bit of sun, not going to affect things. Unless there's doldrums, in which case our sailing vessels may have a problem. That may be an excuse for putting together one of those lovely Donald Featherstone event decks that you just start turning things over and they add the kind of randomness that you need. We are going to be adding a little bit of randomness to today's proceedings. I think in the last episode I said we're going to do the landing over here at La Réunion, and then I thought, wait a minute. We can make things a lot more interesting if the British, who have been repairing the Leopard, suffered very badly damaged in a little fight with the Caroline. So, we can do that at the end of November. Historically, I think that happened in September. We're actually going to push that to December, and I'll tell you why. Because in December, the Creole, which had captured a vessel, that vessel was destroyed, is set to return. Oh, it was damaged. I'm sorry, the Creole was damaged. She is set to return in December, and that's what we're going to look at today. So when does that raid set out? They're going to set out plus or minus December 1st. And I'll show you here in a second what we're going to do. The reason for that is I want there to be the possibility of one of those random chances where something weird happens, that the Creole comes back badly damaged, thinking they're going to sneak in, and then they blunder right into the path of a huge raid, realize what's going on, and then either have to outrun the patrol vessels and make it back to, these islands where messages can be communicated. I'm assuming these two islands are in some kind of communication. There's probably little packet ships, too small, too quick, too nimble to be captured by the big lumbering darn near ships of the line, these frigates. So if they can make it back to one of these ports, then they'll be fine. Or maybe they even say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and kind of stick around and shoot up the joint. We're going to get in the way of that raid, and that might complicate things on our raid. On the other hand, they may sail in, they may completely miss each other, and it just becomes a big nothing burger. But there's only one way to know, and that's to play it out. So what I did is I actually sat down and I said, okay, let's take a look-see. As with before, the Creole is going to be coming in from the northeast. That's because that's where the Bay of Bombay is. That's the Bay of Bengal, I should say. It's where Bombay itself is, too, I would imagine. And the Creole came back in December because, as I said, it was very badly damaged. So the Creole is moving a little bit, and it's my reasoning here for this is that the Creole has saved up for that last sprint. When she gets down within 3 or 4 days of the islands, she's going to haul out, just put the hammer down, baby, pedal to the metal, and race back to try to get back to her home port of St. Pierre. All right, and the blue lines and the red lines, we'll talk about those here in a second. As we always do, we're going to throw a little bit of randomness in. We're going to roll a d6 for exactly where the Creole comes on. If we compare this to November, the ships that were in pretty good shape, they had a nice broad range of possibilities here. Maybe a little too close to Rodriguez. Maybe they didn't get the memo. Here, because the ship is damaged, it's taking a much more straightforward route. We're not going to risk, coming on 200 miles off course. Going to come in on one of these. So you can kind of ignore the blue line here. That's where the starting point is going to be. And then we're going to go ahead and roll a D10. We're going to add that to the date. That's going to be the date on which the Creole appears on one of these 6 circles. Then they're basically going to try to get to this point and then race around here. And I already measured that out for the days so we can see approximately when they might crash. When they may crash into each other. The red line, of course, is the 2 transport ships carrying about 600 soldiers, and the Nereid, which is going to be the escort vessel. And I think, let's take a look here. What is the Nereid? Am I pronouncing that right? The Nereid, Nereid. Well, if we were saying it in Hawaiian, it would be Nereide. Nereid? Tell me, British guys, it's a 32-gun ship. The Creole is just a little 24-gun corvette, but as we've seen, a little corvette dictating the terms of the engagement can throw a whole lot of wrenches into the works, can really complicate life for the Sirius. So maybe the Sirius just chases them off. That may be for our next episode. And of course, if they don't run into each other, then the Creole is going to sail into St. Pierre. Then maybe we do a raid on St. Pierre and try to steal the Creole out from under there instead. Maybe we roll a 50% chance. The ships are going to come. Now, the reason I did this for the red is that they are planning on sailing up. And remember that the sight lines are 16 millimeters, so they want to stay out of sight of land. They're going to make a long, slow climb upwind. Wind is coming out of the north. So if you're sailing at, if your vector is at all northwards, is all north of east-west, this ship can only move 3 centimeters. There it is, 3. But when you're sailing downwind, you can move 58. So there that is. So their idea is they're going to come up and they're going to hook around and come at St. Pierre. Unless, maybe, like I said, maybe they catch sight of the Creole, realize she's damaged, realize she's going to be a little more vulnerable, and maybe we look at the map, topo map, and see if it would be much more interesting to host a raid there. As I said, with the French, with the Creole arriving on the 1st through the 10th, and the British setting out on the 1st through the 10th, there's a chance that their paths may cross. And if they're close, then we may see what happens when a damaged corvette gets into sight distance of the Sirius and says, maybe I can even just go launch a couple of cannonballs, do a little spoiling raid, and maybe even just escape to warn the good people of the French-controlled islands that the raid is in the offing. They're not stupid, man. They're going to know what those 2 transports are. They won't know exactly where it's coming, but that will raise the alert level for when we get to the raids on the ports. As I said, the first thing we have to do is roll a d6 to find out where the Creole comes on. So the Creole is actually going to come on right here. And they are going to appear on on December 10th. So 9. So they are running really late. And they, I guess they probably stopped for sea repairs. Why don't we say that? It was damaged. They stopped for a couple of weeks, put up a temporary mast, spliced everything together. So they're tip-top, ship-shape right now. It just delayed them considerably. When does the raid take off? And the other interesting thing is that raid may wind up occurring just as the Creole is coming into port, which could really complicate matters. So we roll, and again, the raid is going to set off on December 9th. There we go. So now we have to do a little bit more mathing. And because they're sailing downwind, it's going to be 58. That's going to put the Creole right here. And then here is 50. So again, maybe they show up a little bit later. So this would be, let me draw that line out for you guys. Maybe we just go ahead and you're at 58. 58 is going to be about 12. So maybe we just pull this back here. There's your 58. So that's where they are. They appear on the 9th. This is where they appear on December 10th. And then the 11th. And then the 12th down here. So they're actually going to arrive 13. And then we'll just call it late in the evening of the 14th. They settle in to Saint-Pierre. Then we have to take a look at the British. They have their ships all loaded up. They set off on the 9th. So they appear here on the 9th. They appear here on the 9th, the 10th, and wouldn't you know it, the 11th, they're going to wind up, well, okay, you know what? They're probably going to miss each other, aren't they? Because if we break this down, this is going to be at noon on the 10th. And the French are going to be right here at noon on the 10th. And we split the difference again. So on the evening of the 11th, like as the sun is going down, the French are going to be appearing here. And remember that our sight lines are only a half a kilometer. So they are just barely going to miss each other. I don't know that there's any way that they would actually run into each other. The only way that we could do that, if we were a little more honest, here's the thing we could do. We could say, look, I said that 58, they appear here on the 5. So 58 would put them right here on the 10th. So forget this one. And then we measure another 58 to intersect with a line right there. And this is where they would appear on the 11th. And so if this is the case, appearing here and here. Our ships are going to cross right about there in the early afternoon. In fact, they may just wind up catching sight of each other. Huh. Now, we had to kind of wrangle things to make that happen, but we're interested in scenarios, aren't we? You know what? One thing that occurs to me, I do need to check how fast convoys are, because this is the other thing, is that, yeah, your frigates are going to be moving at a pretty good clip, but in our campaign system, convoys are, I did this a little backwards on the strategic chart, so here's the speed. Convoys moving upwind are really, they're only going to be able to move 10 millimeter. And I think the troop transports are going to be slow enough that I need to recalculate this. I don't think they're going to hit each other. I think that if we need to change, wow, man, maybe we don't want to sail them upwind at all. I think an alternative route might look a little something more like this. And that's really not going to help as far as our hoping for a ship-to-ship battle. I think we need to move these guys directly downwind in the transports. The transports move a lot slower than I gave them credit for. Yeah, that's going to be really slow, isn't it? I think our transports moving at 17 millimeters are really going to be, oh boy, how do we, let's flip it around like this so we can measure this out. And we got to keep them down south of the island there, right? We got to keep them outside of that. What did we say it was, like 15 centimeters? That's our danger zone. So we're going to have to stay out of there. And if we drop our ruler like this is going to be, 17 centimeters is going to be a 10-day sail. So if we bring it down like this, that's 10 days. I think we're going to have to do a raid on St. Pierre this time. That's going to be December 19th. And then it looks like we're spending Christmas in St. Pierre, because they can only sail upwind at 10 centimeters. And again, we need to, maybe we just have to go down one more. So that's the 20th. And then sail straight on in. It's going to take a day and a half to get up there for our transports. Although, really, they're going to wind up landing somewhere around here on the evening of, looks like we're spending Christmas in St. Pierre. So December 22nd, that's when they make landfall. And the raid will be on 12/23. So that does change, and that means that the Creole will be the vessel in port. And they will arrive in port, as we saw here, 11, 12, 13, 14, on basically the 14th or 15th. So they'll have had 8 days to kind of offload supplies, start getting things ready for the next season. And that's when a raid is going to happen. So I think that's it. I think we're about ready. So let's take a look at how we're going to run that raid. To answer this question, we're going to do ourselves a little bit of research. This, of course, is the Earth. It's the globe. And up here is the Bay of Bengal. I hope you can see my cursor. The French have been raiding up here, taking all those spices and silks and all the wonderful treasures of the Orient. And to get them back to France, they got to take the scenic route. They had to come all the way down south of Africa, come all the way back up, and then run that blockade back up here at the home ports. This is a very convenient, see this little curve of blue shallow territory down here? If we zoom in, it's just to the east of Madagascar. Here's Réunion. This is our boys right there, Mauritius, Port Melthorn. Now, of course, this is known as Rodrigues because it was named by the Portuguese, who also found this to be a delightful place to stop off on their way to the Orient. But in 1809, it is controlled by the French, and we're going to zoom in. Of course, this, again, just remember, this particular island has gone through a few changes over the last 200 and, what would it be, 16 years? 216 years. But we can still get a good look at the landforms. Notice it is a volcanic island. There's a couple of big craters up here. There's some roads going through. Probably not good hiking right now. Big valley through the center of the island, but still a lot of uplands. We're going to zoom right in on down here on St. Pierre, and what we find down here is a river that drains the center of the island. So this whole area
drains down through here, and of course that river is useful because you can move goods up and down it after you offload them from the boats. And this right here is the harbor, which probably was laid down originally way back in the day. This is going to be the chief defensive structure for the southern end of the island. This will be where the Creole is placed, is sheltered and protected. Not quite as big a harbor if we go up here and take a look at where the big historic raid went, St. Paul. Now, interestingly, the raid on, was it St. Paul? Or was it Saint Denis? I think it was raid on St. Paul. Yeah. And interestingly, St. Paul doesn't quite have the same nice, lovely harbor. What it does have is some really good defenses. A lot of cannons up here on the heights. There's a little bit of bluffs here looking down on the beaches. And again, but that's really neither here nor there, because we're going to come back down here to the southern tip of the island, and this is where our raid is going to happen. So one thing you will notice is that the scale here is 2,000 meters. So this is a little over a mile from here to here. And our boys are going to want to land. What we're going to do is and we're going through the same process that the British would have. They need to find a place where they can land, and they probably don't want to land on the eastern side of this great big river. Instead, and again, why are we looking at St. Joseph? Is that what it's called right now? No, St. Pierre. I'm looking at the wrong town. Forgive me. Same rules apply. If you take a look at this river here, steep bluffs, hard to cross. There's a modern-day bridge right here, and based on the shadow, we can tell that you don't want to take a raiding party over this if you can help it. So instead, it's probably a good bet that if we're raiding the harbor, we're going to be landing somewhere over here. And again, this is about, I wonder if there's a tool here that we can measure. Oh yeah, there's a little ruler. So if we drop our ruler here on the harbor and then measure, so select starting point there, and we measure over here. So now we're up to 32, that's 2 miles, right about there. And so over here at the Aéroport de Pierrefonds, probably a little too far, but if we kind of dive in and look, there's a nice big solar farm making everything look ugly. Look, there's a lot of beaches over here. So there's a lot of territory that the French are going to have to patrol, and they probably run patrols every couple of hours, but that should give the British plenty of time. Maybe they come land over here. This at 82, this is about 3 to 5 miles. That might be a little too far. And what I'm looking for here is just to see how far out. Again, St. Pierre is really big. We might even be able to just land over here. It's 2 miles away. Back in the day, it would have been a lot smaller than this. It probably would have, extended something like this. But this tells me a little bit, right? There's a stream here. And so if we can get over here to the tip of the devil, look at this nice beach. There's probably a watchman's house over here. It's Christmas time, right? They're probably looking forward to the Christmas season. So my guess is that what we can do is land a little raiding party. We send a couple of boats in. They do a long pull, and they can come in over here. And maybe right here we can do a little scenario where we drop off some British raiders over on the other side of this hill. Oh, this looks like a landfill to me. So maybe down over here on these beaches where they are not likely to be observed. And they come through the farmers' fields, and they have to get to this blockhouse right here. I have no idea what that is. But this is a pretty good, right? Here's a nice little sheltered harbor. This would be a great place. There's a lot of waves there right now as they come crashing in. And these look like bluffs. But this is probably a good place to land 600 men, get them organized, far enough away from town that they can then start, riding in, whooping and hooting and hollering and raiding and doing all the kind of nasty stuff that you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of. And so just by looking at what the real world map looks like today, we can kind of set the stage. So here's this road here. A lot of the existing roads today follow the older roads that were laid down a long time ago. The guys that did historically, the guys that did the mapping, the guys that surveyed these islands, they would have picked the most convenient route. And everybody moving forward generally would have followed that same route. So we can drop a road down, maybe on the northern side of our of our battlefield. We can send some guys in, maybe around a hill, trying to get over there. Maybe throw some sentries out. This is too good of a beach, so maybe the French have some patrols out walking around. And if we can take out the patrolmen, then we can land our raiding party. And if we have trouble landing those, if word gets back to town, then we'll have to factor that into how we're going to do the big raid. Now, one thing I'll point out is that by raiding St. Pierre instead of St. Paul, as I said, St. Pierre is a smaller harbor. There's probably not as well defended, not as well guarded. The British are not going to be able to do as much damage as they historically did to the French cause, but it'll be easier to get in, easier to get out, even with those fat, slow-rolling troop ships. And that will present us with perhaps an opportunity for the French to launch a pretty impressive counterattack. If word gets back to the other side of the island, maybe those ships that are holed up here in St. Paul will make a break for it, try to break out. Oh, you're only protected by the... well, let's see, they got the Creole down there, so maybe we do a cutting out operation on the Creole. But the French say, oh, geez, you only have the Nereid protecting you. If I can bust out with my 2 ships and use the cannons of the Creole, this could work, right? The French might actually counterattack. The commander of the land forces, not particularly active, not a very high initiative. Maybe we go with that historically. Geez, I'm just not sure. So I'm going to put that together offline, and in our next episode, we're going to do a little beach assault. We're going to do a little landing there at the tip of the, what is it called? The tip of the devil. Let's click on that, see what that picture looks like. Can we move this at all? Yeah, so, yeah, oh, that's perfect, man. Look at how good that looks. I'll throw a copy of this up here on the video so you can see that a little bit better. Nice protected bluffs. Nobody walking along that road is going to be able to see down here. We're going to have all kinds of privacy. We're going to be able to walk down and climb up those bluffs. Oh, it's going to be great. This next episode, I'm really interested to see how this works out. It's going to be a combination of sentries, and maybe it erupts into a bigger, maybe we do some chance cards to see how many defenders are there. It is Christmas after all, so maybe a commander has taken some of his units, and they have enlisted the aid of a few women who are entertainers of the adult variety, and there's a lot more of them than you expected, but maybe they are, as the saying goes, 3 sheets to the wind. How appropriate for a naval campaign. And so there's some give and take, some push and shove, and boy, if you think there is with the setup, wait till you see next week's episode as we take our naval campaign on land, specifically this land that you're looking at right here. Hey, until then, I'm praying for you.